Hello, Awesome Soul here, and I am back with a brand new installment in the concept video series. I'm sure this video has been eagerly awaited by many of you. So, what exactly do I have for you today? Well, rather obviously, as you can see by the title of the video, this is the Hive Missile Pod, and it of course is a weapon, but it is a fairly unique weapon for one of a few reasons, but of course I'll get into that after I go over the design. This shouldn't take too long as it is a fairly simple design. Starting off at the very top, we have something rather fancy, and that is missile bay doors. Yes, these things actually animate and open. I added these to fit in line with the higher quality of animations that FreeJam seems to be doing as far as all of their newer weapons go. If you haven't noticed, all of them seem to animate in some way, whether it be the shotgun pulling back or the chain gun spinning, and I figured I would keep that same higher quality visual style for my weapons. Moving down, our next point of interest is the lower middle section, and that of course is rather obviously a mounting point, and there is another mounting point on the reverse side as well. Further down, the gray sections on the left and right side are exhaust ports. All of that missile exhaust has to go somewhere. And then at the very bottom center, we have 2 mounting points. So that means there is a total of 4 mounting points. 2 on the bottom and 2 on either side. Now, the rather sharp-eyed viewers out there can gather exactly how tall this thing is just by the fact that I've pointed out that those are the mounting point sizes. But just to hammer it home and make sure there is no confusion, this part is actually rather small. It is only 4 blocks tall, 3 blocks wide, and only 2 blocks deep. Now, you might be asking yourself, what exactly is going to happen when the missile bay doors open? That would make it 5 blocks tall, would it not? Well, I will come back and answer that question in a little bit, but I need to explain something else before I do that. And the last thing I do need to go over before we get into the stat breakdown of this weapon is also along the same lines as size, and that would be the size of the missile. So here we have a picture of a Hive missile right beside a Lommel missile, and yes, this is to scale. Now, this image here might leave a few of you scratching your heads, and luckily, as some of you may know, I do have a Patreon, which I post teasers to these concept videos. But I posted this teaser to there, and pretty much all of the comments I got were, wow, the Lommel missile is already really tiny, so these Hive missiles might be microscopic, and that would be where you're completely wrong. The thing is, most people only see the back half of the Lommel flying away from them with the trail of smoke covering up what the actual projectile looks like most of the time. So yes, big thanks to my Patreons for actually commenting on that so I can actually clear this up for everyone else. But what we have here is an actual official Robocraft render of the missile firing. As you can see, the Lommel missile is pretty damn large. It's about 1 block thick and 6 or 7 blocks long. So now if we go back to the comparison picture, doesn't quite seem as bad now, does it? That would make the Hive missile about 1.5 blocks long, so it's not actually that small. With all of the visual breakdowns out of the way, we can now delve into the information. Now, I'm sure many of you are wondering, what exactly does Hive mean? Well, it of course is an acronym, and it stands for Highly Intelligent Vision-Guided Explosive. I'm sure that might give away one aspect of it, but perhaps it's not exactly what you think it means. So, what exactly is this weapon all about? Well, the quick breakdown, or the role that this weapon will be filling, is an accurate, mid-range burst damage weapon. This means that the Hive has less range than other explosive weapons, like the Lommel or Plasma, whose projectiles can generally travel to about the edge of the render distance before disappearing. But as a positive, projectile speed is a fair bit higher than that of the Lommel or the Plasma, again comparing it to the other explosive weapons in the game. The next point is one of the things that makes this weapon so unique, and that would be, unlike every other weapon in the game, the Hive Missile Pod is a fixed weapon. That means it has no rotation. How you aim your projectiles, rather, is that once your Hive missiles leave the pod, they will follow your mouse, aka where your reticle is looking at. Like I said before, the missiles are fast, but not only that, they're also fairly responsive. With this method, I feel it gives a lot more active gameplay towards the players. Rather than just locking on and holding fire, you have to make sure you keep your cursor on the target completely accurately. And not only that, you can use the fact that this weapon has no rotation to your advantage. You can mount this thing facing upwards, and you can use your missiles to arc over terrain and back down on a target if you know where their general vicinity is. Similarly, you can mount these facing outward on the sides and arc them around a pillar, for example, and back to the target. Of course, this can be risky as you're having to gauge where their general vicinity is. You may not know exactly where they are unless you're actually staring directly at them. The next point is something else that's rather unique about this weapon. Some of you may have gathered this by the animation that's been playing, but this weapon fires in an 8-round burst. So this means as soon as you click the button to fire, it will fire 8 missiles automatically. So just like how the ion weapons fire multiple projectiles with a single click, this one will also do the same. Although of course the ions are modeled after a shotgun, so you would expect it to do that. I've opted to do this for many reasons. One, it's a rather unique feature and makes it stand out from the other weapons, especially the other missile-based weapon, being the Lommel. Number two, for balancing reasons. This is meant as a burst weapon, so you fire your missiles, you arc them towards an unsuspecting target, and then they get hit. But you then have to wait a little while before you can fire your next volley of missiles, which will then give the target time to react. Of course, you can also move yourself into position, so it's all about positioning yourself in the right spot to hit the target for the next time. Reason number 3 is also for balance, but that is when you switch off to another weapon, the Hive missiles that are still flying through the air will stop locking on to anything. They will not follow your cursor, they will just continue on in a straight line at that point. With this 8-round burst style, you need to direct your missiles to the target safely before you can switch to another weapon. This way you can't launch a massive volley of missiles, switch to your ions, drive up to your target, the missiles hit them, and then you finish them off with a single ion blast, for example. That would be rather overpowered. And reason number 4, the fact that these missiles follow your mouse would lead to a lot of lag if there were an insane amount of them on the screen at once. Anyways, with all that balance out of the way, we can now continue. As to be expected, each of the individual Hive missiles deal low damage, and they also have a low splash radius. But that of course is per missile. If all 8 of the missiles hit, you will be dealing a considerable amount of damage. But of course, there is a slight delay to all of your missiles flying out of the tube. They don't fly out all at once. So it will take a lot of skill and patience if you want to deliver your payload successfully. Now, as for the CPU cost of this weapon, I was thinking something in the range of 80 to 120. That is sort of the lower mid-range, I like to call. I think this is a fairly good range, as this is a smaller weapon, but it can still pack a punch. But a rather important point is the fact that because this has no rotation, you can build this thing directly into your bot. That means you can protect this thing behind cubes. So if it's kind of in the lower range, it won't have too much health. So you'll have to protect this thing properly. And on the topic of mounting inside your bot, going back to what I said at the beginning of the video when we were talking about the height of the missile pod, I brought up the fact that when the doors open, it becomes technically 5 blocks tall. Well, as some of you would expect, the fact that this is a stationary weapon and it cannot rotate, you would still need a building hitbox of sorts. And that building hitbox is in the form of a rectangular pillar sticking out directly from the tube. So that means you cannot build anything in front of the tube for a considerable distance. Of course, you will have to adjust your build accordingly if you want to fit this in properly. Now, the fire rate I can envision for this would be as follows. 1 Hive would give you an 8-second reload time, but 4 Hive pods, aka the nominal count of the weapon, would give you only a 4-second reload time. Keep in mind though, it takes 1.5 seconds to unload your entire payload, aka all 8 missiles. And that of course, again, is per click of the mouse. You launch all 8 missiles per click, and your weapon cooldown starts as soon as you click the mouse. So effectively, this gives a single Hive pod a reload time that feels more like 6.5 seconds, and a collection of 4 Hive pods leave you feeling more or less like your reload time is effectively 2.5 seconds. Now of course, visuals are important, so the following is an example of the fire rate that 4 Hive pods would have. And this would be the reload time for a single Hive pod. Of course, the reload times are just something that I envision. Free Jam, if they ever add this to the game, will obviously balance things out and tweak a few things. These are just general guidelines of what I had in my head. And speaking of that, an example for the energy per click I was envisioning is around 4,000. Although that might be a little bit too low due to the fact that even at nominal count, you still have a decent reload time. So maybe 5,000 might be good, as this still deals considerable damage. But keep in mind though, a rail eraser uses around 3,000 energy. Just to give a bit of a mental picture for you guys. And that really does it for all of the points that I have written down. However, there's one thing that I do remember that I kind of forgot to mention earlier on in the video, and that is sort of more of a comparison to the other explosive weapons, the Lommel and the Plasma. So as I said at the beginning of the video, the Hive is a accurate, mid-ranged burst damage weapon, whereas I would call the Lommel, aka the lock-on missile launcher, more of a long-ranged weapon. Due to the nature of it, it needs a lot of wide open space before you can lock onto a target, and generally you want to have a lot of space between you and them. Plasma, on the other hand, is devastating at close range, but the farther and farther you get, it becomes more and more difficult to actually hit the target. So this means that as far as explosive weapons go, Plasma specializes in close range, the Hive specializes in mid-range, and the Lommel specializes in long range. Of course, there is carryover between them, but definitely they have their pros and cons. But the Hive definitely excels at being a mid-ranged specific weapon, as it doesn't have the range that the Lommel does, and due to the fact that this weapon cannot rotate, you will have a bit of a tough time trying to hit targets that are up in your face. So long range is a no-go. Super close range, you're kinda out of luck there, but you might have a bit of a chance depending on which direction you mount your Hive in. But close range and mid-range is where this weapon excels at. Anyways, that will be everything as far as the weapon goes, but of course I would love to hear from all of you. What exactly are your thoughts on this weapon, and would you want to use this weapon in-game? I can see this weapon being a lot of fun for aerial dogfights and that sort of thing, especially with traditional Artbot flyers. I can see it now. And of course, I would like to thank my patrons for your continued support. I think this is actually one of, if not the most intensive videos I've ever made, and that's mainly due to the animation. So this video did take quite a lot of time to produce. So if you can appreciate the effort that I put into these videos, perhaps consider checking out my Patreon page. I also post teasers for the upcoming concept videos I'm working on there for my patrons to see. Anyways, I thank you for sitting through that, and I thank you all for enjoying the video. Again, leave your feedback down below. And with that, I of course have been the Awesome Soul. I thank you so very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care.